She stood in the marble lobby of the bank she'd trusted for 15 years. Her business account frozen, her transaction denied, and her identity questioned. The branch manager looked her up and down and said, the words that would change everything. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to leave." In that moment, she didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She simply turned around, walked out into the afternoon sun, and made one phone call that would send shockwaves through that entire building. Before we go any further, I want to invite you to subscribe to the Black Voices, where we share real stories that matter. Stories of resilience, dignity, and truth. Hit that like button if this story touches you, and please, share your own experiences in the comments below. Your voice matters here. Her name was Naomi Grant. And if you saw her walking down the street that Tuesday morning, you'd see a woman who carried herself with quiet confidence. She wore a navy blazer, her hair pulled back neatly, her stride purposeful but not rushed. She had a meeting at 11, payroll to process by 2, and a conference call with investors at 4. Naomi was the founder and CEO of Grant Solutions, a mid-size consulting firm. She'd built from the ground up over the past 12 years. What started in a spare bedroom with one client and a dream had grown into a company. With 43 employees, offices in 2 states, and annual revenue that made her proud every time she saw the numbers. But that morning, Naomi wasn't thinking about revenue or growth projections. She was thinking about her team. It was the 15th of the month and payroll was due. Her employees depended on her, trusted her, and she took that responsibility seriously. She'd promised them stability and she intended to deliver. That's why she walked into the Riverside branch of First Meridian Bank just after 9:30. The same branch she'd been using since she opened her first business account all those years ago. The lobby was bright and cold, all polished floors and glass partitions. A few customers stood in line at the teller windows. Naomi walked past them toward the business services desk, where she'd handled dozens of transactions over the years. She recognized one of the tellers, a young woman named Stephanie who usually greeted her with a smile. Today, Stephanie glanced up, then quickly looked away. Naomi noticed, but she didn't think much of it. People have bad days. She approached the desk and waited. A man in his mid-40s, someone she didn't recognize, finally looked up from his computer. His name tag read, Derek Pullman, Branch Manager. He didn't smile. He didn't greet her. He just stared, his expression flat and unwelcoming. Naomi spoke first, her voice calm and professional. "Good morning. I need to process a wire transfer for payroll. My account number is..." He cut her off. "I'm going to need to see 2 forms of identification." She paused, a little surprised, but pulled out her driver's license and business credit card. She slid them across the desk. He picked them up slowly, studying them longer than necessary, his eyes moving from the cards to her face and back again. She could feel something shifting in the air, something uncomfortable and wrong. He set the cards down. "This says your company is Grant Solutions?" "That's correct." "And you're saying you're the CEO?" The question landed like a slap. She felt her chest tighten, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm not saying it. I am the CEO. I founded the company." He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "We've been seeing a lot of fraud lately. People coming in with fake credentials, trying to access accounts that don't belong to them. I'm going to need additional verification." Naomi's pulse quickened, but she remained calm. "I've been banking here for 15 years. My account is in good standing. What additional verification do you need?" "I'll need to call the number on file and speak to the account holder." "I am the account holder. Ma'am, I need to follow protocol." She felt the eyes of other customers on her now. The air in the room seemed thicker. She took a slow breath. "Fine, call the number. But I need this processed today. My employees are counting on me." He made no move to pick up the phone. Instead, he stared at her in a way that made her skin crawl. It wasn't suspicion. It was judgment. It was dismissal. It was something deeper and uglier than a simple verification process. Another employee, a woman in her 30s, approached the desk and whispered something to Derek. He nodded, then turned back to Naomi. "We're going to need you to step aside. We have other customers waiting." "I've been waiting," Naomi said, her voice still controlled but firmer now. "And I need this handled today." Derek stood up. His posture changed. His tone dropped. "Ma'am, if you don't step aside, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the branch." The words hung in the air. Around them, the lobby had gone quiet. Stephanie, the teller, looked down at her hands. Another customer, an older white man in a golf shirt, watched the scene unfold with open curiosity. Naomi felt the humiliation rising in her throat, but she refused to let it show. She spoke slowly, clearly. "I am a customer of this bank. I have done nothing wrong. I am asking you to process a legitimate business transaction." Derek's face hardened. "Ma'am, we have the right to refuse service to anyone. I'm going to need you to leave." For a moment, Naomi didn't move. She thought about arguing. She thought about demanding to speak to someone higher up. She thought about all the times she'd walked into rooms where she wasn't expected, wasn't welcomed, and had to prove herself twice as hard just to be seen as half as competent. She thought about her team waiting for their paychecks, about the years she'd spent building something real and solid, about every barrier she'd ever broken through, and then she made a choice. She picked up her identification, slid it back into her wallet, and looked Derek Pullman directly in the eyes. She didn't yell. She didn't plead. She just said very quietly, "You're going to regret this." Then she turned and walked out. Outside, the sun was too bright. The street noise felt distant. She stood on the sidewalk, her hands shaking just slightly, and pulled out her phone. She didn't call her lawyer first. She didn't call her assistant. She called someone she'd known for years, someone who sat on the regional board of First Meridian Bank. His name was Leonard Hastings, and he picked up on the second ring. "Naomi, good to hear from you. What's going on?" She kept her voice steady, professional. "Leonard, I need to tell you what just happened at your Riverside branch." She told him everything. The denial, the interrogation, the dismissal, the humiliation. She didn't exaggerate. She didn't need to. The facts were damning enough. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Leonard spoke, and his voice was tight, with something that sounded like anger and shame mixed together. "Stay right there. Don't go anywhere. I'm making a call." She stood on that sidewalk for 8 minutes. She watched people walk by, going about their day, unaware that her world had just shifted. She thought about all the times she'd been underestimated, overlooked, dismissed. She thought about every young black professional who'd been told they didn't belong, every entrepreneur who'd been denied a fair shot, every person who'd walked into a space and been treated like a threat instead of a human being. Her phone rang. It was Leonard again. "I just spoke to the regional president. He's mortified. He's on his way to that branch right now, and so am I." "Naomi, I am so sorry. This is unacceptable." 10 minutes later, 2 black SUVs pulled up in front of the Riverside branch. Naomi watched from across the street as Leonard Hastings and another man in a sharp gray suit stepped out and walked into the building, with the kind of urgency that made people move out of the way. She didn't follow them inside. Not yet. She waited. She wanted to see what accountability looked like inside that branch. Derek Pullman was still at his desk when Leonard and the regional president, a man named Paul Whitmore, walked in. The lobby went silent. Paul didn't waste time. He walked straight to Derek's desk, and in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, he said, "Mr. Pullman, you're suspended, effective immediately. Gather your things." Derek's face went pale. "What? Why? I was just following—" "You were following nothing," Paul said, his voice like steel. "You racially profiled a valued client. You humiliated her. You violated every principle this bank claims to stand for." Stephanie, the teller, started to cry quietly at her station. The other employees looked down, suddenly very interested in their paperwork. The customers who'd been in the lobby earlier stood, frozen, watching the scene unfold. Paul turned to the rest of the staff. "I want every employee in this branch in the conference room, now." They filed in one by one, silent and shaken. Paul stood at the head of the table and didn't sit down. "What happened here today is a disgrace. A longtime client, a successful businesswoman, was treated with suspicion and contempt for no reason other than the color of her skin. Some of you watched it happen. Some of you said nothing. That makes you complicit." He paused, letting the words sink in. "As of today, this branch is under review. Those of you who want to keep your jobs will undergo mandatory bias training, and you will be monitored. Those of you who don't want to do that work can leave now. But let me be clear, this bank will not tolerate racism. Not in policy. Not in practice. Not ever. Outside, Naomi finally crossed the street and walked back into the lobby. The place felt different now. Quieter. Smaller. Paul saw her and walked over immediately, his hand extended. "Ms. Grant, I can't apologize enough. What happened to you today was inexcusable." She shook his hand but didn't smile. "An apology isn't enough." "I know," he said. "That's why we're making changes, real ones. And I'd like to invite you to be part of that process, if you're willing." She looked around the branch. Derek was gone. The staff looked shaken. The air felt heavy with the weight of what had been exposed. "I'll consider it," she said. "But first I need my payroll processed." Paul nodded. "Stephanie, please come here." The young teller approached, her eyes red. "Yes, sir?" "Ms. Grant needs a wire transfer processed for payroll. I want you to handle it personally, and I want it done right." Stephanie nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, sir." "Right away." Naomi handed over the paperwork. This time there were no questions. No suspicion, no delays. The transaction went through in minutes. When it was done, Stephanie looked up at her. And for the first time that day, there was something like remorse in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I should have said something." Naomi met her gaze. "Yes, you should have. It wasn't cruel. It was honest. And sometimes honesty is the kindest thing you can offer." Naomi left the bank that day with her head high. She didn't feel victorious. She felt tired. Tired of having to fight for basic dignity. Tired of being seen as a threat instead of a person. Tired of carrying the weight of other people's prejudice. But she also felt something else. She felt the power of her own voice. She felt the importance of standing firm, of refusing to be diminished, of knowing her worth even when others didn't see it. That evening, she sat in her office and sent an email to her team. She didn't tell them everything that had happened. She didn't need to. She just told them that payroll had been processed, that they were valued, and that she would always fight to protect them. One of her employees, a young man named Marcus, who joined the company fresh out of college, replied almost immediately, "Thank you for everything you do for us. We see you. We appreciate you." She read those words and felt something loosen in her chest. This was why she did it. This was why she kept building, kept pushing, kept showing up even when the world tried to shut her down. In the weeks that followed, First Meridian Bank made changes. Derek Pullman was let go. The branch underwent a full review. New training programs were implemented. Leonard Hastings personally reached out to Naomi and asked her to consult on the bank's diversity and inclusion initiatives. She agreed, not because she wanted to do them a favor, but because she wanted to make sure no one else would ever walk into that branch and feel what she felt. The story spread. Local news picked it up. Business journals wrote about it. Naomi gave one interview, and in it, she said something that resonated with thousands of people. "I didn't walk out of that bank because I was defeated. I walked out because I knew my worth and I knew they didn't get to define it. That's power. That's dignity. And no one can take that from you unless you let them." Her company grew. Her reputation grew. But more than that, her sense of purpose grew. She started mentoring young Black entrepreneurs, helping them navigate spaces that weren't built for them. She spoke at conferences, wrote articles, and used her voice not just to tell her own story, but to amplify others. One afternoon, about 6 months after that day at the bank, she was sitting in a coffee shop when a young woman approached her. "Excuse me, are you Naomi Grant?" Naomi looked up. "I am." The woman's eyes were bright with emotion. "I just wanted to say thank you. I read about what happened to you, and it gave me the courage to report discrimination at my job. I was so scared, but your story reminded me that I deserve better. So thank you." Naomi smiled, really smiled, for the first time in a long time. "You're welcome, and I'm proud of you." That moment, that small exchange in a coffee shop, reminded her why all of it mattered. Why speaking up mattered. Why standing firm mattered. Why refusing to be silenced or diminished mattered. Because when you use your voice, you give others permission to use theirs. When you stand in your dignity, you remind others of their own. And when you refuse to accept less than you deserve, you create space for everyone who comes after you. Naomi never went back to that branch. She moved her accounts to a credit union that treated her with respect from day one. But she didn't walk away quietly. She made sure the story was told. She made sure people understood what had happened and why it mattered. And she made sure that her voice, her truth, her experience was heard. This story isn't just about one woman and one bank. It's about every person who's ever been made to feel small, every professional who's been doubted, every human being who's had to prove their worth in spaces that should have simply recognized it. It's about the courage it takes to walk out of a room that doesn't value you and into a future that does. It's about knowing that your dignity is not up for negotiation. So if you've ever been dismissed, doubted, or denied, I want you to know something. Your voice matters. Your truth matters. Your presence matters. And when the world tries to tell you otherwise, you have every right to stand firm. Speak up and demand better, not just for yourself, but for everyone who will walk through that door after you. Share your story in the comments below. Tell us about a time you had to stand up for yourself, a moment when you refused to be diminished. Because when we share our stories, we remind each other that we're not alone. And that, more than anything, is where real change begins.